testing.
And we're back.
And we're back. We're back.
Lots happening. Lots of things are happening. A lot of movement in the world from the pandemic.
Yeah.
I think we should start there. Because there's so much happening in the news with respect to what businesses are doing and how they're responding to COVID. You as a small business owner and co-founder of a nonprofit, you guys have a response that you've made. My company has a response. Myself as an instructor, we all have different ways that we've been responding. But I think it's important for us to talk about what businesses are doing now. What are they doing in height of the pandemic, and what are they doing to make sure that employees are in a safe environment and comfortable about what happens next?
Does employees' comfortability matter as much as this has been pushed?
So I think it does. And not only do I think it does, I know it does, because you need people to be in environments where they can be productive. The bottom line is you need people to work. So if you need them to work, you need them to also be somewhat happy and comfortable in the state of things for them to be able to be productive. And I say that because before now, if you would ask me that question, I'd say happiness, yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe we should care about people's happiness. But this is beyond happiness.
If you pay for utilities and to have an office space, your employees need to be in that office space.
Absolutely, but this is beyond just you making them happy. This is about safety. This is about welfare, their personal welfare. This is about their ability to understand that they're in a place where they are cared for in the height of the pandemic.
I agree with that, but as a company, if you can set up the protocols and like create, safe spaces, then your employees need to have their butts in the office.
I agree with that, but you're also you just said.
Like, think about how many businesses got cubicles where you're in your own little cubicle and you putting up if these little glass plastic little defenses are good enough for all these restaurants and shops that everyone is still going into, right? Because retail and spending is up, even though it seems like ain't nobody got jobs, but spending is up.
Yeah. And
people are comfortable walking into all these different stores and retail restaurants. They should be comfortable to be in the office. But everything you
addresses what I mentioned, that it helps them to be comfortable because you've done something. Now, there are varying degrees of what that means to people, but from an employee perspective, if you've seen that your company has done something to respond, to the pandemic and respond in a way that gives the appearance that they care and that they're trying to make the environment safe for you, that's going to heighten your degree of, being comfortable in the workplace.
But see, I agree with that, but I also think it's we have a problem with just like entitlement culture in general in this country because it's, again, going back to all these restaurants that people are still going into, all these fast food restaurants, all these stores, none of these restaurants rolling out all of these special media advisories letting their customers know, we're putting up barricades and we're putting little dots on the floor to make sure you stay apart. Yeah. Nobody's making these big announcements, but people are still going into all these stores. People are still going out to buy food. People not just isolating their houses right now anymore.
Right.
And I think when it comes down to work, specifically, people are all, I don't want to feel comfortable, I don't want to feel like this, because they're used to being in the house. People I think people just want to stay home now.
I do. I agree with you. I completely agree with the sense of entitlement. I think a company has to find the balance between giving employees what they need versus giving them what they want. And the more people stay home, the more they could potentially feel a little bit more, demanding of what they want so that they're comfortable going back in the office. That's not what we're trying to do. But what we are trying to do is make sure that employees are moving in a way of being responsible, that they're actually coming into the office in a responsible way that the organization has set for them. So that needs to be known, that needs to be addressed, that needs to be done. But the challenge, I think, now is companies trying to find the balance between what constitutes safe return, how do they continue to increase productivity, meet their bottom line, do all the things that they need to do to keep their business moving, and do it in a way that provides employees with an opportunity of knowing that they're in a company that cares about their welfare.
And one of the problems I'm seeing is that there's not enough. There's a lot more known about COVID and the virus than it's being put into the media or that's been told to people.
Yeah.
So, for instance, with my nonprofit, we have a grant with DC government to administer COVID supplies and like do a whole COVID awareness and like do testing and all of the stuff. And as a part of that grant agreement, like we have to do a webinar. It's like this 6 to 8 hour webinar training on like contact tracing. And one of the things they said is a contact is considered being within 6 feet of someone for 15 minutes or more. If you aren't within 6 feet of someone for over 15 minutes, it's not going to just transmit like this. You're not going to just catch it. And so there's a lot more information known about how infectious COVID-19 is, because it's not as infectious as what's been portrayed and told, but at the same time, companies and people, like, that information isn't being disseminated, and there's so many misperceptions about what's going on. So when I say companies have an obligation to make sure that their employees are comfortable, I'm talking about things like that. I don't mean here's a couch now and here's a comfortable partition and here's, put your feet up here and here's a room now where you can, take a break and watch TV. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm saying with respect to the facts and the information that on what COVID is and how it can be transmitted, and just the state of where we are in this country and where organizations lie within their different states and cities. That information needs to be known to employees, and the more that they provide that awareness, then they can provide a facility. If they're transitioning employees back into the workplace, they can provide a facility that people will understand. Okay, I understand the risk. I understand how it can be, how someone can be infected. I understand how it can be passed, but I also know what my employer is doing to safeguard me from, potential transmission from the virus, and what they're doing within the facility. I agree with that. People also, I think, need to think about how they're safeguarding and protecting themselves.
They do.
People still aren't even wearing masks to the extent that they should be, and people are still out here.
They do.
But when it comes down to companies having this responsibility, I think giving too much is definitely a slippery slope. Now, like you said, like, companies shouldn't just be like, oh, here's a couch and here's a nice little pillow. But I think we are seeing a paradigm shift right now in relation to workers and employees making very high demands and expectations of their organizations, and expecting their companies to meet all their demands. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree that in height of what's happening with COVID-19, people are scared, people are afraid. I mean, for good reason. People are dying every day from it. So they want to feel safe as they move about. And right now, the safety that they feel, for the most part, is in their own homes. And so for organizations that have cleared employees to work remotely, I can see the majority of employees feeling like, I don't want to go back to work. What are you doing for me to make me feel safe about going back to work when I can still work for you from where I am? So it's. But there's a lot of people also saying, I could work from you from somewhere else. And a lot of people are starting to travel and going to beaches and going off and like flying, like. And they're getting work done. They're getting work done. Yeah, but if you can hop on a full plane, you can take your butt in office. Yeah. I mean, there's a point. Like, again, from like a business owner standpoint, you're still paying for rent. You're still paying for the office spaces. You still have all of the furniture. You still have to pay all your utility bills. Like, so you don't want a vacant. You don't want a vacant space. Well, one of the things I've seen that I've noticed some companies are doing, they've had a hard and fast rule. No one's going into the office in 2020. Here's our phased approach. Starting in February or starting in March or whatever date that they've picked, this is how we're going to start phasing employees in, and this is what that means. This is what we're now going to do. And they've put a hard and firm, everybody's coming back into the office. And this is when they're coming back into the office. And I think when you're clear like that, if you want to be directive about how you change your culture or how you shift people from remote to in-person now during the pandemic, you have to be very clear about what that means. You have to be very clear about what the rules are around that. You have to have your human resources folks involved. You have to have all your human capital people involved. Because the other thing that we haven't mentioned, I mean, some organizations have unions. There are employee rights too. So you have to, bring all that into consideration. And, when you're sharing with employees, this is now how we're going to do business, and here's the bottom line and how that works, they'll follow. They don't have a choice. And if there are some choices and some stipulations in that rule, those are also known to them too. So I like the fact that some employers are really
directing the workforce in a certain way. What I don't like, what I've seen quite often, is there are a lot of companies that are just kind of like, we don't know what we're doing yet. Maybe we'll come back in October. We're thinking about it. Let us know how you feel about it.
I think a lot of that has to do with our government. And our government going back and forth and not being very responsive and directive. And it's almost the same, because it's like just how like employees are looking, for leadership to all these to their companies and to the corporations. A lot of these corporations are looking to our government.
What's happening in the government?
Our government
it goes back to the leadership issue.
As a leader.
I mean, we have a leadership issue in this country. It goes back to that. We see every states and cities are responding to this differently. That just shouldn't be. Like, we're not working in one accord in this country, and so we have a pretty severe leadership challenge. So I understand that a lot of the organizations in the U.S. are kind of all over the place with how they're responding to COVID, because we haven't had a directive, from the office of the president that says this is how we are going to function in unison about this issue. And so it's causing organizations to kind of scatter in how they respond to it. So I understand that, but I think it's important for organizations to take a firm stance on what they're going to do. I believe as a leader, you have to show people your strength so that they can follow. And the strength is in your ability to lead, to manage, to direct, and to give people assurance on how that goes and how that's going to be. And that's where we are now with how we're reshaping culture. Like this pandemic is really causing organizations to figure out how do we deal now? And we don't know what 2021 is going to bring. We don't know what's going to happen with vaccines. We don't know any of this stuff. So how do we deal? What do we do? So for you, as a small business owner, what have you been doing? Like, how is it shifted for you? How has it been for you in your business?
Well, I think it's been different for us because, like, we always have like this very flexible, adaptive culture before COVID even hit, right? And I mean, we had Flex Fridays. Like, what was embedded in our culture was already like Flex Fridays, and if someone needed to work from home, they could, because like just of the nature of our work and like how we don't need to be in the office every single day. Like, we do morning check-ins, every morning with the team anyway. So like, we know that you got your deliverables, you get them done. If you need someone's support, you just check in. And I think it goes back to the culture piece, where a lot of organizations, because of the culture that they've already had set, they haven't been able to adapt as well. Right. And so when I think about us being able to push forward and move forward with the pandemic, I mean, because even before the pandemic, I never really felt like we even needed the office space. I mean, we needed somewhere to have our things, and we needed a central location. But I think that we're going to begin to see a culture shift in the way organizations, cut back spending, right? Because like, one thing that's for certain in American businesses, everybody cares about the bottom line. Right. Like, every company is looking at like, where can I cut spending in this area, that area. And this is about to be a
real
really
estate
big,
is one of the higher costs. So. And
we're about to see it, and I think that's why we're probably about to see a drop in commercial real estate in general, just because, like, companies are going to recognize they don't need these office spaces. And they don't need to pay all these utility bills. And now if you're not having offices, you ain't got to buy desks and paper, right? And like all these little mundane like types of like small things that are adding up.
I mean, that's a great point, because one of the things that I've been seeing and reading, and as businesses have been trying to figure out how to respond to the pandemic, I've seen that a lot of businesses are trying to figure out how they bring employees back into the office, instead of trying to figure out how do they reshape this remote workforce now. Now that they have everybody home, and they haven't seen any drops in their bottom line, their ability to provide services and products and so forth, if none of that's changed, why have this grand plan?
Well, one of the things you always told me, when I was younger, is more in relation to my relationships. But if it's not broken, why fix it?
That's right.
Right. If it's not broken, why fix it?
It's true. It's true. So it's baffling to me that some of even the most mature companies in this country are going, how do we phase employees back in? Why aren't you having a different conversation?
And what it can look like, what you just mentioned, is when we see this shift, it's better for companies to think about how they can make their culture benefit from this, right? Leverage this and like help it progress to move forward, right? So like if now all of a sudden you're looking at it and say, my productivity hasn't dropped. My employees are happier because they're home. So maybe I shouldn't have an office space. I can take that $100,000 or however much I'm paying, for our office space and rent and our lease, and say, why don't I actually make this an extra day off for employees, or figure out a way to have, and make it a benefit, right? So like, if you can cut your expenses in a couple of different areas because of the way the pandemic is shifting business, then how can you reallocate that money to another area that benefits your employees, that helps enhance your culture, that makes your customers a little bit happier? Like, how can you take that money and do something different? And that is where a lot of companies need to start putting their head, as they begin to think forward about enhancing their business. Yeah, so especially when you think about benefits, when you think about the current structure of benefits, of course, there's health insurance, there's life insurance, there's all the, the things that we know exist. But, I've seen a number of employees are, they want more time off. They've already tapped into their leave for the year. And maybe even before this even hit, they've already, kind of tapped into the volume of leave that they have for the year. So now they're like, I'm stressed, I'm having issues. My life is different now. Some people have kids at home, they're homeschooling. They're figuring that out while they're working. All these different things are happening. So they're coming back to employers like, what are you going to do for me? Like, I need more leave. I need some space here to do something different, so that I'm not stressed while I'm trying to juggle all these new roles that I have in addition to my 9 to 5. Imagine if some of these companies said, you know what? No one's coming into work. We're going to now turn our offices into daycares. Oh my goodness! So you all drop your kid. You can drop your kid off at the office and go back home and work. Oh, that's a phenomenal idea. It really is. It's a phenomenal idea. In addition to that, when we think about the fact that, for some employees that do have that structured 9 to 5 job and structured leave programs and things like that, why are we boxing people in to keep working that way? Now that you're home, and especially for the people that have kids and family members to take care of and other responsibilities, why are we still working in this mode of thinking that people have to, be at their desk between, 9 and 5 all day and just like in this rigid type of structure? We've moved so far beyond that, because if you think about, even for you, like, in your business, you don't have that sort of, you've already baked into the culture things like, we don't have to be in the office every day to get work done. I'm sure that probably translates to the time that people work. But if you can get things done and you can work in the evenings, why is that still not acceptable? Why do people have to sit at their desk for 8 hours a day to get work done? And work within the constraints of this organizational framework that is now old and outdated. It's completely old and outdated. So providing, rather than organizations spending the time to figure out how to enhance these programs, because that cuts into their money. So, frankly, they're thinking, do I really want to do this? Do I want to offer this as an additional benefit when I haven't cut costs in other areas? That's something that they have to think about. But while they're doing that, why not think about adding flexibility into the workplace in the way that people work? Why not say, you know what, here's your 24-hour day, get it done, and maybe put some, parameters around how that goes and a little bit of structure in how people work. But there's no reason for people to do 9 to 5 days anymore in some jobs. Now, I can't speak for everything in every job. I think that there has been a push to kind of disrupt that in a way. Yeah. It hasn't been, super progressive, but if we look at the culture of like some of these tech companies and like the Silicon Valleys where, or like even like WeWork where, businesses are starting to put in like nap rooms and like nap pods and all these things, right? Like that kind of disrupts that like that old culture of how you should be working, sitting in your desk from a 9 to 5, because it's like, hey, you may come in at 9 or you may come in at 8. You may work for 4 hours, you may take a lunch, you may take a 1 hour nap, refresh, reset, and then do your next 4 hours or however long you need. And I think that there has been a shift there. One of the things with us being in DC, and because the government moves so slowly, I think here specifically, it still feels like it's slow, and companies and corporations aren't progressing, as quickly as they should, because I do think that when it comes down to the traditional culture of working a 9 to 5, like it isn't conducive for someone to be as productive as they can be. Yeah. If you have someone that's sitting down and working 8 hours straight, like, how fine-tuned is your mind to like really be that focused the entire time and not have any like stress or additional adverse mental health effects with feeling the pressure of needing to, from your employer to want to sit there and have to do your work all day.
It's definitely, it can be stressful, and it can definitely trigger mental health challenges. And one thing I'll say from the government perspective, one of the things that the government has done really well, and I agree that the government moves at a different pace when it comes to certain things. But one of the good things I'll say from a government perspective is the government has alternate work schedules. So the government has a structured leave program that allows for, of course, a 9 to 5, but then they allow for 10-hour days and off every Friday, or off every, 1 day a week, and 9-hour days and off every other day during the week. So they have these alternate work schedules that, even for me, when I came back to the government, I had no leave. Because you have to accrue leave to be able to use it. I didn't have any, so I said, you know what, I need an alternate work schedule. I need to be able to go to the doctors and do different things and take care of my personal business.
Which is also another crazy thing. When you think about people need to go to the doctor, doctor's appointments, dentists, things like that during the year, and like those businesses are only open during the day on their weekdays. And people have to work.
Open during the weekends.
People have to work.
Yeah, it's true. And now you think about how things have changed with COVID. A lot of companies, some doctors' offices and medical professionals are really just starting to open again. Some of them closed and had to follow their state guidelines, but they were scheduling telehealth visits before they would even give you a true visit, for the issue, and so that's actually added to, in some cases, added to the volume of appointments you would typically have for an issue. And if you're someone with a pre-existing condition or a new condition, or something medically where you have to actually physically go into the doctor's office, now you're home. Now your employer might be clocking you every minute to figure out what you're actually doing, because they're unsettled about this new remote workforce, because some employers are. So they are, some of this is really causing micromanagement to be at an ugly high. So you have that to deal with. And then you really need to take off for your appointments, but then you're stressed about getting back into the seat that you were in your house to check in on whatever work that you could have done at 8 o'clock at night if you had the flexibility. So we really need to rethink how we direct our culture in the height of something like this, because we have a pandemic right now. We don't know when it's going away. We don't know what's next. We don't know when something else is going to hit us, where we're really going to, need to make sure we have people in place wherever they are to be able to get work done. So
absolutely,
it's important.
COVID is disrupting in so many ways. And
I know another thing that companies are looking into, and it's not new. There's always been talk about diversity and inclusion and what that means, but they're looking at really their concentration of employees and workplace benefits, but also workplace inclusivity, and how to do that better and differently. Some of it is driven by the fact that some companies are really faced with a number of employees retiring. So you have a huge workforce that is now no longer working in retirement. And then you have the new, the younger people now becoming very prominent in the workforce, and some of the younger generations are like, why do I have to sit here and be this stuff for 8 hours? And
we busybodies.
And really, they're driving the culture in a different way, where companies are saying, okay, how do we be a little bit more inclusive? How do we foster an environment where we're really, not just saying diversity in name, but we're actually looking at the workforce and making sure that we're hiring from within. I remember years ago when I was a consultant, when I worked for a company, actually is when I started with Booz Allen. I, just graduated college, started Booz Allen, and it just left the federal government. And I remember how happy I was about the fact that a company like that had all of these different forms for different ethnicities and different groups.
What do you mean forms? In their languages?
Yeah, what they had was, so they had like an African American group where we had people from all levels, all walks of life, coming together, all black people, that had talks about career paths, talks about mentoring, put together forums for coaching and things like that. So they had it for all these different ethnic groups, and I was proud of that. I was happy about that. But on the flip side, one of the issues that I saw back then was they weren't recruiting they weren't recruiting at the HBCUs. They weren't recruiting at some of the colleges that had people that looked like me. So a lot of the faces that were coming in, I was one of only black young woman at the time that was working in the company. And I thought that was a problem.
What do you mean? So just so I'm clear. So essentially there were groups of
when
different
you came
ethnicities
into the company.
It was like here, Kenice, you have access to this group of black people. Yeah, you have access to
a number of different groups. Here's one. You can pick whichever one you wanted to join.
And you said that they were hiring from all these different places for these groups. It just didn't, are you saying like the people were a certain way?
No, so what I'm saying is once you got hired by the company, you could find a different group to be a part of. So if I wanted to find out, okay, where are the black people in leadership? Where are the black people that
you would go to the group and find
I can go to the group and find out.
Okay.
Because some of the people had been there for years. Some of the people were from different offices because the company was really large. But when I looked at the hiring initiatives and when people were being brought in, I was one of only black. So you're saying that even though they had these groups, they still weren't pushing to hire from these different people of these different origins. Not at all. So that was a problem. I thought that was a huge problem. So I spoke to leadership about it. I said, I really think that, we were in Virginia and in Maryland and DC. We had offices in all these different parts of the metropolitan area. Why aren't we talking to people at Howard University? Why aren't we going to other schools that, not just for the purposes of targeting black people, but why aren't we more diverse in the community of people that we're looking at? They had maybe 7 schools that they recruited from, and that was it. And of those 7 schools, if you looked at the population of black people, it was extremely low. So we're never going to get the talent in the African American community ever if we don't look beyond those schools. And so they said, well, this is what we do. This is how we do it. We only go to these schools.
And so I want to get your opinion on this, because I think that in a lot of ways, when you do recruit from these same types of schools, you kind of end up getting the same type of person.
Yeah,
right? And when we often talk about like diversity and inclusion and some of the problems, like there's 50 million black people in the United States. And there's typically a type of person that kind of ends up going into, some of these routes. And so, when we think about hiring practices and like that model of, oh, we're only gonna go to these 7 schools, which has, less than a 1% black population.
And they end up hiring the same people.
The same type of black person.
They do. They hire the same.
It's like you look for that same. It's like, this is your token black person. This is your token type of person. Yep. Then I think that's another thing that's missed in the conversation in general, and how there's this perpetuated bias based off like the type of black person you're used to, the type of black person you're used to having in your company, the type of black person you're used to hiring on paper, right? Yeah. And so that's a whole nother issue with inclusivity and belonging and diversity, because
it's the same. And for me, I was like that outlier. So I was almost like, I looked to my left and my right, like, how did I get here? So I tell you, for me, I didn't go to one of these big name schools. I went to Strayer University, which was Strayer College. Back online. When I hired. No, not all online, not all of it. Some of it was online, but I
always thought you was an online school.
That the reason why I say that jokingly is because some of my online, like, you remember that because as a kid, you would sit with me.
But also because Strayer would have.
That's why.
Yeah, I would sit with you while you had your classes online, but Strayer also, all the little commercials used to be like online.
Yeah, so they have
online college, online degree.
No, when Strayer started, Strayer actually wasn't online at all, and then they transitioned. So one of the reasons why I went there, because I started at Howard, and I left Howard, I went to Strayer because Strayer had classes almost whenever you wanted to take them, evening, weekends, all throughout the day, and online. So they added online too. So most of my classes in my last 2 years were probably online, but I did a lot of in-person classes in the evenings too, and throughout the day. So I went to school whenever I needed to go to school because I was working really hard to get my degree at the time. And so But one of the reasons why I was hired, because they were recruiting directly from schools that had students that didn't really have any experience. They were, I mean, as you know, at Georgetown, sometimes some of these corporations will recruit students just because they're at this particular school and they know they're going to get this type of student.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that's what they were doing. So once they did that, they got, like you said, these kind of uniform students, black, white, other. But for me, I had government experience. So I was the outlier. I just applied. Like, I didn't get recruited. Nobody came to talk to me. I applied for the job and they said, oh, wait, you've been in the government for 5 years and you've been in school? Like, how did you do that? So that piqued their interest. And then they, you know, of course I did these gruesome long interviews, 4-hour-long interviews, and they hired me. So I was the only person like me there. There was nobody else like me there. There was nobody else from this school that nobody had heard of. There was nobody else who had a kid who was 3, 4, 5 years old. There was nobody else like me there.
How old were you here?
When I first got hired there, I was actually 23. I was 23. So you were what, 7?
So you brought up.
You
so
were,
you brought up these. So you brought up
actually.
these challenges with leadership. Did you ever feel like you didn't belong?
Yeah, all the time, every day. I felt like, one, because I didn't go to the school. I mean, the students came in talking of all these schools they'd gone to. You know, they'd gone to, I remember Notre Dame was prominent. Even here, George Washington, Georgetown, James Madison. I mean, the list goes on at some of the schools that they'd gone to. They all knew each other. They had all lived on campus. They talked about the college. I had no frame of reference. I was here locally. I never went on campus, you know, for, some of the time for school, but I wasn't a student who lived in a dorm. So I didn't have that frame of reference. I felt very uncomfortable. I couldn't really participate in some of the conversations, and I felt very isolated. My first, you know, couple years were really difficult because I didn't know. I was working every day to try to figure out how to navigate that. You know, how do I relate? How do I participate? You know, and the other thing was, because I was the only one that had a child, I had to leave every day at a certain time because your daycare closed at 6, no matter what. So I had to leave from Virginia by about 4:30 every day, at the latest about 5. So they would schedule meetings 5 o'clock, 5:30, 6 o'clock in person that they expected people to be at. I couldn't do it. So I would tell them, I have to leave. I'll call from the car. So I had the pressures of, I had to call from the car to be in meetings. When I picked you up from daycare, I had to continue to work in the evenings. So I had things that I had to kind of push my way into working differently. So whereas everybody else might have been doing a 9 to 5 from the beginning, I was kind of like, I'm going to have to finish this later. As long as I get it done, you know. And because I was pretty smart and I was, and I picked up on everything quickly. So they just kind of, it was one of those things that they were kind of like, wow, you have a kid and you're going to call from the car.
They didn't know what to do with you.
Right.
They didn't know what to do with you.
Okay. Like, how you say no to that? Oh, you're still going to get it done this evening? Okay, we'll see. And I did every time. So I would come home. I would, you know, set you up for homework. I was cooking dinner, make sure you had a bath. And I was on my laptop. So I would be working on my laptop.
Things. One, I would say that's just remarkable, right? Like, superwoman. But then two, I can only imagine like the discomfort that you had.
Yeah.
But also the discomfort they had and trying to address that.
They didn't know what to do. And the thing is, I was one of one. There wasn't 5 of me. So it wasn't like today. I feel like
you felt awkward.
Yeah,
they felt awkward.
Like now,
they probably didn't know how to talk to you about those things.
What do I say to them? So I feel like now, you know, I think with some of the things that organizations have to adjust to with different where they're trying to figure out inclusivity and all of that. There may be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people that they're like, wait, now we have to think about this. We have to think about this challenge. We have to think about how do we include this group of people. You know, some of these things are popping up as new things that they hadn't had to think about before. Back then it was just me.
And all these are HR issues.
Yeah, these are all HR issues. And so it was just me. So you're right. They were extremely uncomfortable. I mean, I saw it. I felt it. It was always there. And it took some time for me, the confidence I had really rested in the fact that I knew I was capable and could do the job. I was extremely uncomfortable in that environment because I didn't feel like I belonged. I didn't feel like I came from the great families and environments that they came from. I didn't have, you know, I didn't have someone that I could kind of go back to say, I need help financially. Like, it was always just me. So I knew I had to make it. And so I just kept pushing. I was very pushy in a nice way about how I was going to work and what I was going to do. And I just tried different things. So when I told them I'm going to take the call from the car, you know, I'm sure someone might have felt like you need to be here, but no one actually said it. Yeah. And so I just said, this is what I'm going to do.
And that's why it's so important for companies to continue to have like race-based conversations and incorporating things like that into the orientation, because at the end of the day, we all have a certain level of privilege, and unless we continue to push against the boundaries of checking our privilege, like that'll never be something that's addressed within the cultures of these organizations. Like people get tired of having these orientations on, you know, on like race challenges or like inclusivity. Like it's exhausting, but it's something that needs to happen over and over and over again.
But I think too, for the employee, you have to speak up. You have to speak up. I have so many young people that I mentor, that I talk to, and one of their biggest challenges, well, two, is exactly what you said. The organizations, they'll have these conversations, they'll have these talks, but when it comes to doing it in practice, a lot of times they're making these young people feel uncomfortable about the different needs that they have, about the need for flexibility, or about a adjustment they need in the way that they work, or about a new benefit, or about a concern. So they really make them feel uncomfortable, like, you know, how are you disrupting my norm by asking me for something? But as a whether you're young, whatever your age group is, you have to be pushy. You have to speak up. You have to speak up and advocate for yourself. That's the one thing I always tell them. So when someone calls me and they want to talk,
it's really like you're not only, you know, and you have a responsibility to do that too. Like so many young people, you know, they can be vocal and disruptive on their own, or in social media, or out here protesting, or want to do partake in activism and like have all these opinions and stuff. But when it comes to actually addressing those things in the workplace, it's like lock lips.
You have to. You have to be present and be in.
What a lot of people, I think, fail to realize is, by doing that, by speaking up, you're not only helping yourself, you're helping the next person.
Yep,
you know, and the next person may not be as vocal as you, or they may not be as opinionated as you, and you're really doing a disservice to the people that come behind you that you don't pave the way for.
Yep.
You know, when you're at Booz and you're pushing to be able to leave early to pick me up and to do all those different things and navigate the workspace and finish up later, you were really paving a way for another young woman that's going to come behind you eventually, whether it was 2 years, 5 years, or 10 years. Right? And when we look at the culture that is within that organization and other firms now, it's because of people like you in these workplaces that have actually helped these organizations move the needle. And I wonder, from a corporate standpoint, how can companies begin to, one, acknowledge that, like and provide additional benefits or incentives for employees to do those things? Like, how do we reward that? You know, and like that's how we really shift the culture. We gotta stop looking at these things as like disruptive in a negative way. Disruption isn't a negative.
Disruption sparks innovation.
Exactly, and it's way too often that disruption is looked at as a negative connotation when that's really not the case.
So one of the things that when you say, I know you weren't asking me the question directly, but one of the ways that companies can do that is just by listening. The best leaders listen. You have to listen to people. You know, you have to put yourselves in a position where you have a need and a desire to hear from the people that are supporting you and working for you every day.
The problem with listening, though, and you hear it so much, everyone always says you need to listen, you got
to put it in context.
Because a lot of employers and a lot of leaders in general think listening is just, I'm gonna let you talk. I'm gonna set this meeting and go ahead. Y'all been complaining. Y'all feel some type of way. Spit it out.
Right. That's
right.
Not,
or like trying to force people. Like that's not listening.
No,
like that's not listening.
It's not.
Right.
Listening as a leader is not just creating a forum for people to talk. That's not what it is. It's being intentional about why you want them to speak up and really about what. So for instance, when I had a job where I led an organization of about 250 plus people, and when I started the job, I knew what I needed to do. You know, to me, I'm a piece of cake. I know what I need to do. I'm walking in here. I got my goals. I know what I need to do. But then I said, you know what? There's a lot of people here that have been here for a long time. The nerve of me to come into this organization and just do what I want to do with it. Let me hear what some of the challenges are in these areas. I was very specific. I was not creating a forum for people to just talk to me. I wanted to hear specifically on a number of challenges and what they thought they needed to do and advise me to do to fix some of them. So it wasn't just about what do you need to do within your power or Kenice, you need to do X, Y, Z. I wanted to hear how do we work together to overcome some of these obstacles. So we did a number of things. It gave people a sense of being inclusive in this company, in this organization that I was running, but I didn't come in as a dictator to say, I'm just going to direct this work however I want because I'm smart and I'm capable and I have experience. I wanted to hear from the people that were doing the day-to-day jobs. Here's some of the challenges I know we have. Did I miss something? Is there something else there? How do we address this and that? Has something else worked before? What do you think we should be doing about X, Y, Z? The volume of information I heard was just outstanding. And when I scoped it that way, it didn't turn into a complaining session. It didn't turn into people just airing dirty laundry and talking about anything that they had on their minds. I made it very very clear what information or what environment I wanted to create to get the information that I needed.
And that's also because what you were doing, the intentionality was pushed by action, right? Like wanting to create actionable solutions, tangible change, and not just, again, I'm gonna just give you the space to just tell me what the problem is so I can do what I want to do and do what I think best. It's like, no, the inclusive part about listening is receiving others' feedback, receiving what people are thinking, and being able to utilize that so that everything is moved better.
Right. It's like listening
position.
with intention and listening with intention and listening with the intention of having an outcome-based conversation or some action to happen after that.
So many people just listen to respond.
No,
which is one of the worst things you can do.
And I've been in organizations that create forums and they say, if you want to talk to me, just come and talk to me. The open door policy. Oh my God. Okay. I get it. I get what people are trying to say when they say I have an open door policy, but you need more behind that. So what I've told people is, yep, you want to come talk to me? Sure. If you have an issue that you want to talk to me about, fine. Have you talked to your manager first? Because if I'm not the first person or your first supervisor or manager, or there's other avenues that you should take before me, do that first. Let me know what they've done for you. Let me know how that has been resolved for you. And if it hasn't, let's talk about it. Like, I don't believe in just an open door policy in an organization. You have to give people context and what that actually means. You have to give people direction and instruction about how to have constructive communication. Yeah. So that's why, some of these organizations that do this, they're checking this box to say, I create this environment for people to talk to me. I have an open door.
Talk to me whenever.
No, that's not that. Yeah, no.
And that goes back to the intentionality piece, right? Like, how are you intentionally setting up lines of communication within your organization,
right?
So that the dialogue does flow, right? Like, just saying I have an open door policy doesn't help. Doesn't help anyone.
No, you have to be intentional about it, and back to what you were saying about the responsibility of the employee to speak up. You're not speaking up just for yourself. You're speaking up for everybody else. And at the moment, you might not care about anybody else, frankly. Yeah. You might not care about speaking up for anybody else, but
speak up for yourself.
You have to speak up for yourself. So that's one of the things that when someone talks to me and wants advice about what to do and how to navigate a situation, I say confront it. You have to talk about it. The challenge, though, I think, is how to do that effectively. And sometimes it's what words to use. How do I communicate it? What do I say? And that's where you get, you may need some practice from somebody that knows and has been in those kind of situations to help you. But you have to speak up. You have to advocate for yourself. And that's what I had to do, because I had a 7 or 8 year old and I'm working in a consulting firm that has never seen anybody like me, and it has never experienced anybody like me. So I had to help them experience me. I had to help them with it by, telling them what I could and could not do. And then I think for me, I knew that I needed to also be excellent. I felt like I was excellent, but they needed to see my excellence while I was there, because it wasn't a culture that easily adjusted to the fact that I was taking meetings in the car and working in the evenings. Other people didn't necessarily work like that. So
do you think it would have been different if you were a white woman with these challenges, or do you think it would have been the same?
Well,
do you think being a black woman perpetuated that, or made it in some way?
I think it would have been different for a white woman. And the only reason why I say that in this context is because there weren't a lot of black people there. So I know that they were used to white people, male and female, being in that kind of environment. So not just being a black woman, but being a young black woman with a child, being a young black woman from an environment that they weren't familiar and used to, all of those things added up to being, kind of interacting with someone. But
it sounds like in a way, you being a black woman kind of helped your case. Because they were so uncomfortable. Because they were so uncomfortable, they didn't know how to address things with you. It sounds like you kind of just got to, as long as you were excellent, like you just kind of got to be like,
it was almost I think it was shocking.
They were too uncomfortable to have that conversation with you.
Yeah, you're right.
They were too uncomfortable to have any of those conversations.
I think it did help it. Initially,
I think if you were a white woman, you may have gotten to belittle a little bit more.
Potentially, it's possible. I think that it was so shocking initially that I think the silence was just shock. What do we say to her? What do we do? And then over time, it became that I wasn't going away. I wasn't going to just be quiet when I had needs that were different from other people. So, but I did a lot to push my way into being inclusive, by joining different forums and different groups and doing when I could after work activities, because we had a lot of networking activities and things like that. So I made it so that, I scheduled time with your dad to have you so that I could do different things. So I did my best, and it was stressful at the time because I had other personal obligations, but I did my best to even though they may not have been fostering an inclusive environment for me, I kind of made them do it. Yeah. Like I made it so by freeing up my time to be able to participate in different things. So I like the fact that even back then, because that was in the early 2000s, they had environments for people, to join different types of groups and to support diversity in a way, but when it came to hiring practices, it was just lacking. I don't know what it's like now, but I know back then it was a challenge. So that was something I had to kind of overcome. Man. But I think I did a good job of it.
Well, well, I think so too. So I guess COVID really has pushed to create this more belonging environment with people being at home. Like going back to that.
I think it has too. One thing that I think is going to be interesting. So we talk a lot about leadership, and one of the things that I've done in my own career, whenever I've decided to take a job, leave a job, go to another job, because every time I went to another position or another organization, because I was always thinking ahead about, I didn't just take another job and sidestep. I always wanted to move to the next level. So every time I took a job, I always looked at their leadership. I went to their website, or if I was physically, if I went on an interview, I looked at the walls to see, because a lot of these companies have pictures of their leadership on the walls,
like the director,
who are in the photographs. Yeah. So I did a lot of that.
Board.
Who's on the board? What do they look like? Do they look like me? So I did that every place I would go. And if I decided to take a job that didn't have any leaders that looked like me, I looked at that as an opportunity. I looked at it as a challenge. Like, how do I get my picture on that wall? Yeah. Especially working in IT where, it's not as male dominated as it used to be, but it still is. So, I always looked at it like, how do I push the envelope so that I am the woman amongst these leaders and the black woman amongst these leaders? Because it was both. It was being a woman in information technology, and it was being a black woman in information technology. So all of these different challenges and all these different things, while people are home, I don't know if other people are thinking like I did, but at the time, I wanted to be progressive. I wanted to move to the next level. I had no intentions on leaving one company to be in the same job that I was in before. I was always like, okay, if I can't do it here, I want to do it someplace else. I need to be at the next level. How do I do that? And when I saw that the leaders didn't look like me, I knew it was going to be a challenge, but I also didn't look at it from a negative perspective. I thought I might be the first. I'm going to try to be the first. So, COVID has presented, I think, the time and opportunity for companies to look at their leadership pool, look at their employees, look at their benefits, look at things like cost for rent and real estate and things like that, and figure out how to be better. How to be better when it comes to diversity and inclusion, but other things, because it's not just that. These challenges, as we've talked about, have been there for quite some time. Yeah. These things are not new. We are not just having a diversity issue. We are not just having an issue with flexibility and benefits and things for these companies. This is not new stuff. These COVID has just, put the magnifying glass on the issues that were already there. So I think it's the time now.
But we're starting to see some of the bigger firms take a stance in a lot of different ways. And especially as we've seen social issues, ignite during COVID. Like, we're seeing a lot of companies, a lot of corporations, really support issues that their employees care about. And I think that's one way that a lot of corporations are really beginning to get behind their employers, because people want to work somewhere they feel proud about.
Yeah, they do.
Like, more than like, oh, my company is one of the biggest or fastest growing, but like, my company, stands behind this issue, which I truly care about, right? Yeah. And my company is putting money into these social issues. And I mean, we're seeing specifically at my nonprofit where, there's so many corporations now that are looking for entities like mine that are doing work in the community, have been doing it for a while, whether it's working with kids or, organizing and activating, right? Or telling stories and wanting to be a part of that, right? And companies are beginning to realize how when they get behind these issues, their employees want to work harder and want to be a part of it. And they also want to give money, and they also want to share and post what their company's doing and feel proud. Right. And what a lot of companies don't realize is you don't have to spend a lot of money to make your employees feel proud. Yeah. People want to work somewhere that does social good now. Yeah, they do. And that's one way that companies can really thrive in relation to moving the needle, and in relation to making their employees more happy and making employees have more benefits, because that's what makes people happy. So that's the episode for y'all. Disruption. Be disruptive. And then that's how you make it work.
Yes.
That's how you make it work.
All right. Color King, we're out.
We out.